I'm Julie Pace from the Associated Press here at the White House, where we're going through the latest jobs numbers from the December report. Here to break it down for us, as always, White House economist Christina. Let's start with this unemployment rate. We're at 10%, we're holding steady, but how much longer can we stay at or around 10% before this slow recovery starts to stall out?
Well, I mean, I think your point is exactly right. We don't want to stick at 10%. We want that number coming down as quickly and as much as possible. That's why the president back in December held his job summit and said, let's take every responsible action we can to help jumpstart private sector job creation, because that is so incredibly important to get people back to work.
Is there concern that one of the reasons we're actually still at 10% is the fact that a lot of people just aren't looking for jobs anymore?
You know, we certainly have seen some people drop out of the labor force. That tends to happen in severe recessions, and that's certainly something that, you know, again, it's a reason for getting people back to work, getting jobs being created again. I think then we'll see them coming back into the labor force.
And one of the kind of starkest indicators we saw in this report is that we lost 85,000 jobs. It's particularly stark when you look at November, where we actually gained 4,000. What accounts for that?
I think, you know, you're absolutely right that December was somewhat of a setback from November, where we did now learn that we'd finally added some jobs in November. So I think, you know, that is certainly a phenomenon that's going on. I think the right way to think about it, though, is these numbers do jump around. Another way to say it is real recoveries come in fits and starts. And November was, in some sense, a start, and December was a little bit of a fit. But I think if you think, you know, sort of in general, or what's the trend, I'll give you an illustration. Back in the first quarter of 2009, we were losing an average of 691,000 jobs per month. In the fourth quarter, with these new numbers, we now know we were losing 69,000 jobs per month. That's still way too many, but it's a tenth as many as we were losing a year ago.
Now, this report was the last of 2009, which, by all accounts, pretty dismal year for the U.S. economy. Looking forward to 2010, in terms of employment, where do you see this rate going? Is 10% the high water mark for the year?
So, I mean, you're right that 2009 was a very rough year for the American people, for American workers in particular. You know, I think one thing that we're certainly going to be seeing, we think the economy is expanding again. I think people's estimates of how fast GDP has been growing for the fourth quarter are now certainly higher even than in the third quarter, and we anticipate continued growth in the economy. In terms of employment, you know, absolutely what I anticipate is we're starting to see stabilization in employment. Obviously, the next step is job growth. I think we're going to see that by the spring. The unemployment rate, I mean, there's a lot of factors. I mean, the faster we can get employment going up, obviously that thing comes down. The phenomenon we talked about earlier about some people dropping out of the labor force because they're discouraged. As we start to see recovery, they may come back in. So what happens to this number, I think, is hard to say. The important thing is we're all committed to getting it down.
You talked about some of the positive signs that we're seeing. Is there any concern, though, that one of the reasons that we are seeing some of this growth is because of temporary factors like the stimulus? And once that money goes away, maybe we'll see that there isn't anything to really prop up these figures.
Well, of course, you have to remember why we did the fiscal stimulus was precisely because the private demand wasn't there, and the fact that the stimulus is working and is helping us to have this positive GDP growth, that's a good thing. I think what you're pointing out is, right, we want that to be replaced by private demand, and that is certainly the whole logic of how this is going to work, and we're going to be monitoring to make sure that the private sector is coming back. I think we are starting to see that. We are starting to see firms replenishing their inventories. We're starting to see consumers buy again, and it's you know, that should be the way that this all plays out, and we're going to have to be monitoring it.
And finally, you know, unemployment doesn't happen in a bubble. Concerned that if this rate stays as it is, or continues to kind of go up and down by 1 or 2 percentage points, that we're going to start to see an impact in the housing market, foreclosures, areas like that?
I think I mean, you're right, it all hangs together, and that is why the president has said, you know, job growth is his number one concern. I know when we meet with him, every time he says, what more could we be doing? And so that is absolutely crucial, and that is why he is committed to taking whatever actions need to be taken to help jumpstart private sector job creation.
I'm sure we'll see you back here next month talking about these numbers again. I'm Julie Pace for the Associated Press at the White House.